Hello and welcome to Ways Women Lead, the podcast where remarkable female leaders share their personal journeys and offer valuable guidance on advancing your career as a woman in leadership. Join host Anna Gromadzka and her guests as they delve into various aspects of leadership, including diversity, equity, and inclusion. This podcast is brought to you by Six Group, a global executive search and leadership advisory firm.
Welcome to Ways Women Lead, a podcast where we share stories, best practices, lessons, and advice of outstanding leaders. And today I have a special guest, Monica Mauri. Monica is a former Chief Human Resources Officer and board member at ERIKS, a leading specialized industrial service provider and distributor that employs 10,000 people. Monica is also a former Vice President, Human Resources and board member at Staples Solutions, a provider of workplace products, services and solutions with 10,000 people across 17 countries and over 2 billion euros in revenue. Monica started her career at Randstad and holds over 20 years of leadership experience in HR, where she has steered organizations through transformation, turnarounds, divestitures and sales into private equity. Welcome to Ways Women Lead.
Thank you so much, Anna. I really appreciate it.
Let's start with understanding the key milestones that shaped the leader you are today. You've successfully moved across vastly different sectors, from professional services and Randstad to most recently industrial engineering at ERIKS. What have been the key milestones in your leadership journey?
If I were to point out three things that helped me to come where I am today, I would mention first the start. I started in consultancy that allowed me to see many different industries, to work with high skilled professionals. I had responsibility early on in my career and I learned client management. The second one would be having held specialist roles in HR as well as generalist role. Every time I had a specialist role, I could go deep into the knowledge, and then going back to generalist role, I could keep the helicopter view. And finally, the multicultural experience working internationally helped me a lot in having different viewpoints, asking questions and put myself in the shoes of others. And that really helped me, not just working cross-culturally, but also be more effective in my own culture.
So it was constant learning there, wasn't there? And constant adapting to different realities, different needs, different cultures, constant stretching yourself.
Yes, indeed.
Thinking back at your career, what would be the key lessons you took out of it?
For me, has been always not about career per se. Career has been a consequence. I was more interested in the job and into the opportunity to shape things, to make things, to change things. Focus has been always on being effective in solving the puzzle I was looking at the moment. And then the career came also because I wanted to have more influence, and to have more influence, I needed to go up into the hierarchies, and the two things moved together. It's not that I started thinking, one day I would like to be CHRO.
Your ambition wasn't the title. You enjoyed solving problems, seeing an impact, and in order to have that impact, that real decision making, you have to be at the leadership.
You said it very well. For me, impact is the thing. Job titles or roles much less.
And why HR? Why did you eventually decide to follow the HR path? Why not other functions?
I started with an interest on psychology. And then I discovered social psychology and organizational design and business. I fell in love with the profession.
So ultimately you enjoy to drive greater performance.
And more happiness of people. My vision is to have thriving companies where people can thrive. Is more about the balance of being fair and supportive towards people and towards the business.
When you joined ERIKS, you entered a new industry at the board level. How do you earn authority in such a situation fast? What is your first 90 days playbook?
I start always learning the business. That would be the first step, to learn how the business works and get to know the stakeholders. A good understanding of the strategic agenda is also crucial, because then when you know the business, the stakeholders and the goals that you want to achieve, then you can open your HR toolbox and just pick up what you need. In some cases is recruitment, other cases is talent management, other cases is something else. But when you have these three things clear in mind, then you can use your professionalism and really take out from the box what is needed. And when you do that, then people around you get to know you and trust you and actually sponsor your plans that then became easily their plans as well.
Build a little bit context for us, because it was a big transformation. 10,000 people, the business was sold from one owner to another. You drove it to profitability. You did a lot of changes with management. How can an HR leader best enable a CEO's commercial vision through such transitions?
Yeah, I could say a lot of things, but at the end of the day, I think it boils down to very small number of good common sense things, starting with be clear on what is that you want to achieve. Make sure that people understand the what and the how of what you're doing, and then communicate, communicate, and communicate. Sometimes you know things, sometimes you do not, and sometimes you know and you cannot communicate. But that should not stop us from being open and transparent and say what we can say. And when you have good management, meaning people that are also clear, they communicate well, they engage, they have conversations with people. When you have good management, then also big transformations can go well. We had a good engagement all through the process, and we unfortunately had to let go people, but the engagement remained high for the entire time. And this is not uncommon. It's just being clear and transparent and consistent and treat people with fairness and respect.
Do you have advice for people how to make that communication clear? How do you check the understanding of people?
We started with the audience, so having a clear picture who they are, if it's a general employees or middle management of board, for example, and having clear from the beginning what is that you expect them to do after they receive the message. In that way, we create segments of our audience and drafted slightly different communication. And they have also an opportunity to challenge and ask questions and be comfortable with the message. Because if they are not comfortable, then it's really unlikely that they will pass it down in the proper way.
You also talked that you had to introduce or develop further the concept of diversity. You brought more women into leadership positions at ERIKS. Why and how?
Yeah, you know, ERIKS is still today, I believe, 75% men, most of them with more than 20 years in the industry, which is really a wealth of knowledge, because specialism is very important at ERIKS. On the other side, there was no much difference among the workforce. So we decided to embrace the journey of creating more difference, but also embracing diversity. And because you need to start somewhere, we started with gender. And if we talk about KPIs, we moved from 8% female in management to 25% female in management in 2 years. And then we managed to keep it stable around 25%. Then we introduced another KPIs around promotion rates, male and female. Then I'm really proud to say that for many years we had same percentages in promoting men and women. But I think what also made a difference has been introducing the topic of inclusion and having conversations around inclusion. And we had major events like Inclusion Week or Pride Months, but also more smaller information moments around Diwali, for example, around Ramadan, around Chinese New Year's, with our own employees explaining to colleagues what it is. So we move from no one knows what the words to having space and opportunity to have the conversation. And that started moving the mindset. And I've been really blessed with the board because they were extremely supportive and also visible during these events. And that's really made a difference.
I was going to ask you if you had any resistance.
I would say everybody has his own assumptions and his own cultural biases. I have, they have. I have someone specifically in mind. I remember we had a long conversation around having marketing pictures with a female with a helm and gloves and all the protective gears, but female and actually female of color. And then this person was telling me, hey, I do not understand why we need that. That's been the start of our journey. He left the company at a certain point, but when he left, actually, the one thing that he made a point of doing was to thank me and the team for making him understand the importance of having more diversity and specifically female in management, which for me was really, wow, something that you think, okay, finally I got it, and we've been very, very proud of this.
That's incredible because sometimes people are not easy to change their mind about these things. What's your argument about why diversity and inclusion is important? How do you explain it to people?
Diversity brings richness, and richness bring better decision making. I'm not saying that it's easier to work in an intercultural and diverse environment, not, but when you have, for example, two nationalities, you have two pair of glasses. When you have eight nationalities, you have eight pair of glasses. Everybody has a blind spot, but the more people you have that think differently, the smaller the blind spot gets. So I think it's incredibly enriching to have different styles and different perspectives. How to make it work? That's maybe a challenge, but it's definitely a benefit to the business, and there are many studies that prove it.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. You talked about having experienced biases yourself in life and career. How did they present themselves for you? How did you handle them?
Yeah. Well, early on in my career, I did not believe in bias. Actually, I was a bit naive, but I had this idea that if you are competent, you are committed, you have good results, your gender or the color of your skin does not matter. I had this in mind, and actually, what was not true. Let's face it. If you ask me a specific case, maybe I can offer one. I was quite early on my career. I had a young family, so three young kids at home. I was in a global role and I was interviewing for a global role. And then I had this recruiter that he really made a point of advising me not to go after the global role and go after a European role instead. He was arguing that the global role would be for me too much traveling. And I really told him, I don't know in how many different ways, that was not a problem for me because I was already traveling to start with. And yes, indeed, I had young children, but I had a stay home dad. My husband was 100% at home, so it was not a problem at all. No way. He did not listen. I could not convince him. So, was this one a bad person? Actually, not. He was a lovely person, and he was genuinely trying to help me out. But in fact, he was caring for me, but nonetheless biased. consequence is that he did not introduce me to the customer, so I lost an opportunity.
It's perceived by a recruitment consultant as a less risky decision not to present someone who has in their mind all these challenges or kind of obstacles to performing this role effectively. But we are talking more and more now about capabilities where you have to force yourself to really assess a person properly and not just assume and choose the
Yeah.
easiest decision.
And the pity is that at the end of the day, trying to help, but what he did is taking his own cultural expectations and just translate it to someone else. And that's where, in a way, it goes wrong. So back to bias, everybody has bias. I'm a white Italian Dutch woman. I have my bias because of that, and everybody has one. The point is not being ashamed or feel attacked when someone pointed out, but just keep an open mind and say, "Oh, really? What did I say? What did I do? Can you please help me understand?" In this case, can you help me understand why would you be so comfortable in traveling or whatever it was the point. So open mind asking question is the point against biases. We will never be in a place where someone has no biases at all. That will never happen. I think we need to embrace that we are human, we have biases, we make mistakes, and just say, okay, I may have said something wrong, I may have did something wrong, I did not intend it to hurt, just please let me understand what it is the approach that is more helpful.
And effective questioning skills.
Absolutely.
Listen, question. In case of interviews, ask the right questions to understand their situation and their capability. Don't just assume. And you mentioned that at the beginning of your career, you believed that if you do a good job, then you have the same opportunity, that there isn't bias. But then you changed your mind. What changed your mind? Was it that experience with this recruiter at the time? Was it something else? Was it throughout the years?
No, it's, as HR, you are in the kitchen, so to say. So when you see the kitchen, you see things like, I don't know, a manager that says, we should not promote her right now because she has a young kid, often is around. Or she's very emotional. Yeah, that's a bit cliche, but I can tell you, I know men that are emotional as well.
That's true.
When you see these things, then you do realize. And besides that, there are objective elements. Now is quite a hot topic in 2026, but fair pay is really a topic. And when you run the numbers, you see a gap, and the gap is real. It's not that no one is making that up.
When I talked to you earlier, you told me that one of the things that you believe in is that women can have it all, but they cannot be perfect at everything. So, yes, you can have a family, you can have a career, they're not mutually exclusive, but you need to know how to prioritize. You cannot be perfect at everything. So, how do you decide which parts of your life get to be just good enough so you can protect your energy for what matters?
Yeah, that is quite interesting, a bit tricky. This concept of have it all sounds a bit heroic. It may be misleading. Maybe I would reframe the topic, and here is how I say it. So I do believe that on our personal and professional life, we have many stages. And if you look at the business side, the business has also stages. They have at different times, different needs and different priorities. For me, the point is to try to have it clear where to focus and what matters in every single stage or moment. Because when what matters the most is clear, then you can mobilize your own resources, but also your support network at home or at work to get there. Priority shift and also the engagement of your network can shift, and the need of the business may shift depending on the stage of the business. So at the end of the day is a balance that is never perfect, but no one is Superman, no one is Wonder Woman, and no one is alone. As a manager, you help your team to succeed, but they can help you as well. The same at home. Sometimes you are in a giving position, and sometimes you just need to take something out of them. And when you have a clear picture of yourself and what is important at this specific moment, then I would say the trade-offs gets a bit easier and the balance gets a bit easier.
And do you remember one specific situation when you had to switch, to rebalance and think, okay, now I need to leverage my resources a little bit more?
Yeah, now an episode comes to mind. I have 3 children, and my children are adopted. So from time to time, there are needs and emergencies. And I still remember one of those times where I needed to be somewhere with the family and was a board meeting. And then my leaders and my colleagues that really pick up for me with really no problem, no blame, no nothing, and was an important board meeting that I had to miss. It went so natural, and when you are clear and you are transparent and there is trust of decisions, I would say come easy. But it's a very interesting topic because there are some cultures that allow more flexibility than others, and some organizations that are more tolerant than others. Because you ask what would be your advice for a young female that wanna have a healthy and fulfilling career. If you have the opportunity to choose a company that you know has a good culture and gives you space for these things, if this is your priority. Because there are people that are not after that, they are not interested in family, they have other priorities, fair. But the point is just make sure that you choose the company that carries the culture that matches your needs and your priorities.
It's so important, isn't it? Don't try to present yourself as someone who has the values that the company wants you to represent if you don't actually hold them. I always advise that people in interviews, of course, put your best foot forward, be prepared for interview, for an assessment, but in the end, be yourself, because it's important that there is a cultural match. If there isn't, sooner or later, someone will burn out in this union, and it's just not going to work.
Because short term you can pretend, but long term you can just simply not.
And so, talking about organizational cultures, last time we talked, the topic of burnout was on your mind. I brought some statistics about burnout. For example, Deloitte shows 77% of professionals have experienced burnout. Harvard Business Review says 82% of executives struggle with it, but most stay silent for fear of appearing vulnerable. Forbes shows 60% of senior leaders say their mental health have been impacted by work stress. What's your take on how to move away from that? It cannot be sustainable, can it? If everyone, if 80% of your executives struggle with burnout, it cannot be sustainable for your organization. What's your take on it? Have you seen this happening? Have you experienced that yourself? What's your take on this?
So I did not experience it myself, but I had people in my team that went out with burnout. And maybe a couple of things here. If we look at it from a personal point of view, each one has different stressors and reacts differently to stress. In my experience, is really important to know yourself and read the message of your body. For someone is high pressure, for someone else is a neck pain, for someone else is not sleeping at night. So people in leadership tend to be high achiever and they tend to have constant high workload. So these type of signals tend to be ignored. And then when you pay attention to them, then it's too late. From a personal point of view, I would say just be aware and keep listening to your body and to the signal. If we look at it from an organizational perspective, there are wellness plans and these type of things that are, yes, indeed helpful. glad that this help is there and available, but I would rather address the root causes of the burnout. And there be many studies out there, but if we want to simplify, then I would point out three elements. One is a chronic overload with no recovery time. So basically people are always on, and no time to recover. If you think at an athlete, they do train hard, but they do have downtime as well. And we as corporate athlete, if I can use this metaphor, we tend to be always on. When we are not at work, then at home, on. There is no time to rest. And therefore, a lot of things then are piling up and push you towards the burnout. Then the second element is low control over shifting priorities. So the less is the agency and the control on your workload, your space, and the things around you, the more helpless you feel and the more stressful the situation is. And you could argue that this is the way it is nowadays, because market changed very much. Yes, indeed, but there is a component that we made ourselves, changing constantly, even though when it's not needed. Sometimes it's needed and is good and must be there, sometimes actually not. And the third element is poor leadership, because there is a correlation between the quality of the leadership and the health and wellness of the people working in a company. So then going back, what would you do? I would address these three things, trying to create as healthy as possible environment to prevent burnout. If you ask me, what would you say to a manager? Then I would tell the manager, look out for changes in behavior, especially when you see people that gets more irritable or trying to postpone more than usual, or not deciding or avoiding, or being 24/7, and you feel like they are in a loop they cannot get out, is the time to have a conversation with these employees and really see what happens. And then I know by experience, it happens to me that when you have the conversation, they say, no, I can manage. And basically, let me alone. But sometimes really we under-evaluate the signals. And I mean, if you are a caring and effective manager and you see this sign, then I really advise to address it. And then your employee may not listen, but at least you planted a seed in their head, and maybe it prevents that they all of a sudden, because then that's what I saw happening. They go, and then they switch off, and then they cannot work, they cannot function for many months.
And you yourself, so you said you never experienced that yourself. What's key for you? You have high threshold on stress, or are you very good at understanding yourself and when to take a break?
That's a good point. It never happened to me, but I think a couple of times as I was close, and it's for me is reading the signals, and then really try to stop for a moment and say, okay, this is happening and this is happening.
So it's being close with people, emotional awareness, understanding changes in your emotions, what's right and what's a signal of something going wrong. So we talked about the wellness culture and how do you build that into the overall culture. One quick advice. What would you remove from leaders' calendars tomorrow to cut stress, and what would you add back that actually improves performance?
I would go back to the three things that I mentioned. So the overloads, I would act on simple things. For example, the amount of meetings that we have, not the meeting per se, but effective meetings. If you look at the meetings that you have in a week, and then you really assess the effectiveness of the meetings, maybe you could be better off without a couple of those. Sometimes people attend the meetings for fear of missing out. So also when you are sure that you share the decisions. There are other ways than meetings that use less time. So I would look at the workload. I would try to take out meetings, but also take out activities that are not impacting directly the bottom line or the customer happiness or something really important. If it doesn't make a big difference, maybe we could do without or do it later. I would give, obviously, within possibilities, more agency to the people, to the leaders, every time is possible. The goal and the output, the outcome is not negotiable and very clear. The way we get there, if they can have a bit room of making it their own, why not? That's why you hire them, right? Because they're brilliant, they are professional, they know their job. Thirdly, massively invest on management. That would be my three actions.
And looking into the future, a couple of questions. One, what is your advice to young women entering the workforce today regarding how she communicates her ambitions? How does she ensure she isn't assumed out of the running for big roles?
So my advice is to be explicit over the ambitions. Do not assume that good work will speak for itself, because often it doesn't. Silence is often interpreted as lack of interest, even when it is not. And that doesn't mean to be aggressive. I think people can be assertive in a calm and fact-based way. The point is just make sure that people that matters know that you have ambitions and what the ambitions are.
And looking at people at your levels, what capabilities now matter most for executive directors and board members, and how can a leader credibly build them?
What will, in my view, be more and more important are capabilities like resilience, good judgment, so separate the signals from the noise, and the ability to mobilize the organization around a vision. That's very important going forward, because, as you mentioned, the speed, the pace of change is so big, and the uncertainty looks like it's growing by the day. It's more likely that people will make mistakes, then they will need to pick the business up again, rebuild it, and then do something else. So the ability to reinvent themselves and the business, resilience, good judgment, and mobilizing the energies and the resources, I think that may be key for the future.
And for you personally, what's the mission that drives you today? How is it different from when you started your career?
I'm very passionate about my job. I've been lucky that I got into the right job from the beginning, making an impact and make a difference. That's what was driving me at the beginning and what is driving me today.
Thank you very much. It was an absolute
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you for being part of Ways Women Lead.
Likewise. Thank you for inviting me.
That's it for this month's Ways Women Lead episode. But there is plenty more insightful and actionable advice from where this podcast came from. Check out our website on www.six-group.com if you'd like to know more about how to build and develop diverse, inclusive, and effective leadership teams, and how to progress your career as a leader. See you next time.